Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and growth. Today I have the real pleasure to be speaking with a professional storyteller, a coach and a trainer. He's, among his other traits, a public speaker who has spoken to over 500 events, and a mentor and trainer for life coaches who are dedicated to excellence in the art of coaching. David Saville, welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Fantastic. David, I met you a couple of weeks ago when you were giving a speech actually at the Evolve Network in Chelmsford, and it was, and I was telling you that before we started recording, one of the very experiential speeches, because, you know, many people just tend to give a kind of a lecture. So they stand on the stage for 45 minutes and they just talk. But with you, it was a very different experience. You actually let the audience do the speaking rather than yourself. And I will ask you about that in a moment. But I want to ask, really, give us a little bit of background, some bits of your story. And when I mean that, I mean maybe one or two key defining moments in your personal development journey that led you to where you are at the moment.
Okay, so there's a lot, but I'll do the early bit and I'll get stuck into the most significant, which is more recent. So most of my life, really, I had severe social anxiety, like severe, culminated in panic attacks in my late teens and early 20s. So for years, I had panic attacks. I also experienced body dysmorphia, which was, I used to, when people looked at me, I used to think I was physically disfigured. Like it was, I was so abhorrent that, like the only reason they'd be looking at me is because I was so weird. I experienced, that was just a horrific period in my life. And so that was a kind of like the foundations of my life going into my 20s, really. In addition to that, my father had Parkinson's and developed it when I was 19 years old. He was diagnosed. And as horrible as it was that he had that, it was actually a gift because it meant that I had to come out of myself. I couldn't just be focused on how I looked or what I was doing. I had to care for him. And I think that saved where life could have gone for me, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I was also in a career, well, I wouldn't say a career, that was a totally wrong word. I was in a job that I started when I was 18 years old, in like pushing barriers in a warehouse, stayed in the same company, the same building for 17 years. And I didn't even think I could get an interview anywhere else. Didn't think I had the talents or the skills to do so. Then about 11 years ago, I wanted to stop smoking. I actually smoked cannabis every day for many years as a way of numbing myself to life and to what was going on. I had to stop that because I was concerned that it would lead to death. And I was failing my dad and what I was able to care for him. I just wasn't good enough. So that embarked me on a transformational journey. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't good enough. Everything I did was nowhere near good enough. And when my dad died just over 7 years ago, that was the wake-up call, really. When I was in that hospital room and I could hear they were trying to resuscitate him, but it was no point. It was too late for that. And just my realization of like everything that I'd failed at, really. I mean, I cared for his body. I cared, made sure he had his medications and that kind of thing. But actually the attention, the care, the support of his soul and his spirit and making sure that he enjoyed his life as best he could was missing, was absent. And that was unacceptable to me. I was stressed. I was busy. I had all these excuses, for how the good reasons why I wasn't able to do those things. And they're good reasons on the surface, but they were not good reasons because, of course, the culmination is he's no longer on this earth and I can never make it up to him. That's never going to be okay. That made me embark on a serious internal reflection as to assessing everything in life, everything I'd failed at. Literally every part of life was nowhere near good enough and it had to change. And that's when I began seeking like mentors, coaches, trainers, getting obsessed with how to actually change in a permanent, deep way. And I had amazing coaches, many, many of them. And then that culminated in me going, well, actually, I love this. I want to be able to do this, and learning from the people who I consider the best in the world at coaching and just being obsessive in that. And then embarking on a journey where I quit my job in October 2014 And then since then, I've been experimenting and testing out and creating my own way of working with people, which has culminated in storytelling. You know, it's one of those things that emerged through having to find a way to communicate publicly, to be able to get people's attention for my coaching, right? It's how I had to do that. And then running a meetup group, Deep Connections London, for 2.5 years, where I realized how bad people were at telling stories. You know, it's like I'd give people, like, for a minute, tell your life story in a minute. I mean, it's a bit stupid question now, really, it's too big, but I used to say things like that, and they couldn't. They would run out of things to say after like 30 seconds, and they'd go quiet. I'm like, so that began a different journey into the nature of storytelling and listening, which I know we're going to be exploring as well today. So obviously there's a lot more to it. I've had lots of my own adventures and transformations within that, but that's the very short, brief version. I live a life of my own creation and have been doing so for the past 5 years, really, I would say. It's been quite an extraordinary transformation. The person you see now it's like the person that you would have seen just over 5 years ago is like an ancestor, you know, a distant ancestor of someone someone told me about. You know, it's like that. It's so vastly different. It's crazy. Yeah.
I can certainly relate to that, because I've had my own journey of self-transformation, and sometimes I look back at who I was a few years ago, and it's hard to recognize that person. So David, you said that the social anxiety you had and the panic attacks, you understood, you uncovered the mechanism that was creating that. So what's that mechanism that was creating these kinds of situation in your life? Because that, I suppose, it applies to many other people that have something similar.
I mean, it's quite a complex question, a complex answer, I guess, because there's many layers to it, and it will depend. So panic attacks is a very specific thing that tends to be, and if you ignore the anxiety, which we're getting consistently throughout each day, a stress response essentially, for long enough, it's likely to build to a panic attack, which is your body, your system going, you're ignoring me, I've got nothing left to do but to knock you on the floor, you know, because it's the only way you're going to hear me. And to be honest, I had panic attacks for years, because guess what? Even with that, I wasn't hearing it, right? So it just got to get worse. And again, then of course, the thing with panic attacks specifically, it's very specific, is once you've had panic attacks, more than one anyway, you start to create the panic attack because you're scared you're going to have a panic attack. And then you're scared you're going to be seen to have a panic attack. And so actually, whatever the initial trigger is, the triggers afterwards are the fear of the panic attack itself. So that's the panic attack specific thing.
Yes.
That's very common, you know. With anxiety though, now this is very important. You know, even when I was at a school last year for 5 to 9 year olds, and I was doing a talk on how to become superhuman, how to become the superhuman version of yourself, right? The children there though, they were talking to me about how they knew what it was at 5 years old to be so anxious that they couldn't move. You know, a 5-year-old, where's that coming from? That's not coming from the child. That's not a natural child experience of a child's life. It's come from the stimulus they've received from parents, teachers, the environment around them, right? That's where that's come from. And this has to change. So one of the things is anxiety is not this amorphous thing, like this monster that is like separate to you. Anxiety is just a stress response in relationship to something real. So most people are living through many stress responses, possibly hundreds per day. You know, every time you get a text message and you haven't responded, and you hear the text message, even if you've got your sound turned up, it creates a mini stress response. Then it sets off a whole chain reaction of who it could be, what the response needs to be. If you've got any unanswered big things going on in your life too, and you might be getting a message from that person, well, guess what? Your emotional system is stimulated, and it creates all these things going on. So you've got layers of minute stresses, just the fact that you're scrolling through Facebook and you've got all these things going into your brain too quickly for you to process. You've got the interactions with people that are stressing you out and you're not dealing with it. You've got those big conversations with your friends that you're not actually addressing, or your family. You've got the relationship you're in, which, should you be in this relationship? You're too busy to even ask that question half the time. You know, and most people, I'll say most, a lot of people are living lives that if they actually stepped out of it for a few weeks would go, what am I doing? I need to change so much. And then the older people get, of course, it gets harder because life gets fuller. But you've got children involved, you've got relationships, and it's like, well, how complex is it to make a change now? You could collapse the infrastructure of your entire life, right? So why are you feeling anxious? And say, well, why wouldn't you? If you don't feel anxious with that going on, then there'd be something wrong. So there we go. There's obviously a lot more to it, but yeah, essentially, anxiety is stress responses that haven't been addressed in the moment, I would say.
Thank you. No, that's great. I can only imagine the deeper layers, but I'm not going to stay in this conversation because I'm much more interested in the storytelling aspect.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you ask, right? Because at the end, it'll be long.
So there was one thing that you said about storytelling that really made an impression on me. You said that storytelling is not about what I have done. It's about who I am.
Yeah.
So I want you to expand on this and then tell us why is storytelling important and what it is that you mean exactly by the definition, the term storytelling.
Okay, I'll start there actually. So storytelling is simply being able to communicate the memories that are real things that happen to you to another person in a way that communicates what it meant to you and that you're able to connect with, essentially. Mm-hmm. That's essentially what we're talking about, connection. Storytelling is connection. And people often get confused with storytelling because of the nature of the label, perhaps, that they need to exaggerate or embellish, or they need to use very eloquent wording. You don't. You need to communicate the emotions in the story and why it matters to you. And this is related to, it's not about what you've done, it's about who you are. And that's what you're expressing through what you've done. You know, you could be staring at someone walking down the street. If you share what you feel when you, like, example actually be easier. So there was a man walking with a cap on and a walking stick. Mm-hmm. And my dad used to wear a cap and a walking stick. So seeing this man walk, and he was struggling, you know, it reminded me of my dad. He had Parkinson's, you know, walking was difficult for him. But he had a smile on his face, and just seeing him, I was taken back to my father, and then of course all the years that we spent together. You know, the holidays we went on, the support I had, you know, my mum and I gave him as he was less and less capable to move. You know, when he started to get into a wheelchair. So that seeing that man walk there just mm-hmm. uncovered entire life's experience really, and connected me to my father. Actually, it felt good. You know, of course there's pain there, but it feels good remembering my father. So there you go. There's a little moment there. So it's not about the man, is it? It's about everything that means to me. It's about my relationship to the memory and what it is. So that's what stories are. And what helped me uncover this was or at least get clear on the difference. Was years ago, I decided I wanted to coach an astronaut. This was like beginning of 2015, right? I just had this New Year's Eve, right? Created a year's worth of plans. Coach an astronaut was one of those crazy ones on there. Seemed crazy at the time. And then I thought, it was bugging me a couple of days later. I'm like, well, where can I find astronauts? And I'm like, well, I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's like got, you know, all kinds of people. Let me see. So I started to look at it, and I realized I was connected by a couple of people to lots of astronauts. So I spent a couple of weeks connecting with, I don't know, 150 astronauts, people at NASA, SpaceX, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Started having conversations with them. You know, I had conversations with many different astronauts about having gone to the space station, about having floated in space, about having actually like slept in space with, you know, just floating in a cupboard in space, right? And yet, as fascinating as the details of what they're talking about is, the way it was shared was so dull. It was, you know, the interest came as I was imagining myself doing it. But the way the person was telling me, the emotion wasn't there. The meaning wasn't there. Mm-hmm. It was just empty, an empty shell. And so if somebody who's been to space can't communicate that amazing thing in a way that lights me up, and I love everything to do with like astronauts and achieving things in life and, you know, the potential for human race. If you can't do that, it isn't about the details, is it, of the story? It's about the person communicating themselves through the story, and that's what's essential. People are terrible at this. They think they're going to be uninteresting, or the person might not want to hear this, or they're so caught up in the details of what the story is that they either, this is quite common, they either just cut the story really short, quickly, so you don't really get a sense for anything of why it mattered, or they list out, like if people go on holiday and you ask them about it, they talk about all the stuff they did, and it's really dull. It's the equivalent of someone getting all their slides and just clicking one slide after another. And it's like, well, there's no meaning for me in your slides. The meaning's for you. Tell me the meaning.
Yes.
So it's the meaning that matters, you know, and the meaning is the emotion. The meaning is why you care. And then through that, of course, we get to see you. We get to meet you within that. And then that's when you get to either connect with someone or not. And either way is good, but at least it is an honest connection or disconnection, you know, based upon who you actually are, not who someone perceives you to be. Or as close as we can get to that, of course, because it's always perception, but that's a whole different thing to go down.
Sure.
So you think the main reason for people not being able to communicate their story well is that they are afraid of how they're going to be judged by the others?
Yeah, definitely. Because people are scared to share the things they've done that they're ashamed of. They're scared to share the things that, the pain they're in. They're scared to even talk about things that are happening right now, in case they might cry, in case they might express an emotion that people have judged, deemed publicly to be unacceptable. And so because of this, the only reason we don't honestly share in the moment what's real is because of the fear of how it's received by others. Yes. Most of the time. Of course, there are always exceptions, but most of the time.
Yeah, and I think this fear manifests in all sorts of different ways that affect our behavior, really, and limit our potential in terms of what it is that we do.
So much. I mean, the thing is, people don't even realize how bad, I mean, because essentially what it means is people are walking around lying. They're lying about who they are. They're lying about, and lying is just not sharing, right? It's the same. You're creating this illusion of who you are because you're holding back. A good example is someone I was talking to, an old friend, someone I used to work with actually, someone I helped cure phobia, funnily enough. First person I ever helped cure phobia years ago, about 11 years ago, when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. In my car at lunchtime, we cured a phobia. I won't go into details now, but it was cool. This person I've stayed in contact with, and she was sharing that she went to this place to work, and she was there, and no one liked her, and she was walking around, and for months, no one liked her, and she'd just go off on her own, and she'd eat on her own, and she just hated being there, but she didn't have another option at the time. And then at some point, she just talked to one person. She says, "What?" And she just asked her honestly. She says, "Why don't you like me?" And she said, "Oh, we thought you didn't like us," because when she arrived, she didn't go and approach them. They didn't go approach her. So the story, they're always making stories, right? But it's like people are making the stories in their head. And so because she didn't just go and actually go hi and actually try and make a connection herself, and the other person didn't either, they both thought the other didn't like each other. And it created this tension for months that was based upon nothing, an illusion. Because this is the thing. If you don't control your stories by actively speaking to people and sharing who you are through your stories, people are making their own stories up about you anyway. So control the story. Get really good at telling them, because you're always a storyteller. We are always telling stories throughout everything we do. So you might as well get damn good at it and share a story that's actually true for you.
That's brilliant. I'm actually taking notes at the same time, writing things down. What you said, that if you don't share out who you really are, people will imagine themselves anyway. So might as well really tell who you are rather than.
Let's be rejected for who we are, not who they think we are. You know? Much rather that. Again, it's like one of the things I used to say at Deep Connections, actually, it's like you want to drive people away with a snowplow, the wrong kind of people, because it's a very full world, right? There's lots of people here. There's only going to be a few gems that are actually going to be the ones you can deeply connect with, like really. And so the best thing you can do is expose who you are, drive away anybody who won't like the things you've done and who you actually are. And then guess what? Who's left are these amazing human beings who you can create deep bonds with. For any kind of connection you could conceive of. It's amazing for career development, for love, for friendship. It's just beautiful for all of life.
For every relationship with another person, which is all life, as you say.
Yeah.
Yes. So Then, David, this will take me inevitably to the next question, which now that we understand how important and for what reasons it's important to be a good storyteller, how can people work on it? What steps can they do to improve it?
So obviously there's a lot. So in the talk, I focused on two specific things for that. And that was one, to communicate, why you care. To actually share the emotion and why you care within your story. Make sure that whatever storytelling, you can get as good at. There's lots of things you can learn about storytelling, right? But literally, if you just share when you're talking about something you've done, just share something. You can feel the emotion, and the way you'll feel it yourself, right? This is another thing. If you want someone to appreciate what you've been through, you have to feel the emotion yourself, because through your emotion, you will communicate that and lead someone else to join you in that emotion through an empathetic response, which is what we're conditioned, what our brains do, right? We have empathy for people. And the way we do that is we can see the emotion, experience the emotion of the person, and we get a flavor of that ourselves. And it's one of those things. The world is full of various different people, but the one thing that bonds all of us, apart from a small number of society, are our emotions. So make sure there's emotion within the story. And often you'll get there by sharing why you care, what it means to you within the story. The other one, actually, I won't mention here, because it's not. I don't think it's without having the experience of it, the virtual reality storytelling, I don't think it's going to be as relevant. So another thing really is to go first. Don't wait for people to, because this is the other mistake people make. They're always waiting for someone to go first and an opening to then share vulnerably, right? That is a way to make life small, because most people are waiting for someone else to lead. It's just the way the majority of people are when you interact and you're at a networking event or a party or whatever. If you're willing to go straight to the heart of it and to share something honest and vulnerable that's real for you, you're opening a doorway. You're taking someone. You're opening your hand. You're going. I'm opening my hand to you, and I'm sharing something that means something to me. Do you want to take my hand? And some people will, some people won't. If you be that person, guess what? You'll connect with the right people quickly if you do. So I think that's enough, actually, because it's those are quite important things for people to get. Most people aren't doing that well enough anyway. If you just do those things and you do them, practice them immediately, you'll become a far better storyteller, a better connector. Really, is what we're talking about, right? A better connector, a better leader is what you'll become through the ability to share your memories in this way.
That's great, thanks. I will try to repeat them myself in my own words, just to embed it. So you said the first way to become a better storyteller is to share the emotions behind what we feel about the story and why we cared about that. So I understand that why it was important to me, wasn't it?
And that can often unlock the emotion within us. By actually talking about those things. It's like the why is it's almost everything within the story.
Sure.
Why, why you care. Then you care and you feel, and then you can communicate that to the person you're with. Yes.
That's great. And what about, David, the structure of telling a story? Would you recommend a specific, way of doing it, or just randomly?
I would say, well, one thing that helps actually is just to understand why it's not really the structure. I wouldn't go into that, because that can get people in their heads about it. And that totally takes a training over time. More simply, it's share stories or memories that are relevant to the person. Like, before you share it, think to yourself, is this going to be relevant to this conversation we're having? Because sometimes people will just start talking about themselves, and it's a bit of a selfish sharing, and it's not connected to the conversation. It's not connected to anything that's going on. And so it's like, just make sure when you are sharing, you're sharing to connect. You're not sharing just for yourself. So I think that is all the structure you need at this stage, I think, to get really a lot better at connecting through your memories. Yeah.
Okay. No, I understand. And for me personally, I'll share something about the way that my brain processes those things. It helps if I have a structure. So that's why I was asking you that. So if I know that first I'm going to speak about this, the what, for example, and then the reason, and then but no, I appreciate what you're telling me
The
about.
problem with that is it kind of means the structures of work if you're going to speak on stage or if you're doing a podcast, you want to share a specific memory, and those kind of things. But actually, we're talking about more person-to-person connection. And so you want it to be messy. Sometimes you'll start at the end of the story and then you'll jump back at the beginning. Sometimes you'll start at the beginning and go to the end. It will depend on what's relevant in the moment, within that. And what we want to do is loosen people up to be able to just flow and share honestly. So I think that structure can get in the way of the honest flow here. Sure. But if you and I want to talk about that after this, I'll be happy to share a little structure with you that's useful.
I understand. Thank you. That's great. And I want to go now to the other side of the story. So one part is telling the story, the other part is hearing or listening, and that was something that I enjoyed very much at your experiential training the other day. So you were talking about listening deeply and about really focusing on the other person and not saying a word and let them just speak out as much as they want. So I want you to explain this deep listening the way that you described it to us, and then I have some more other things that I want to ask you on that.
Okay, so with regards to this, most people the active listening thing is terrible. It's a horrible thing, because what active listening, at least in the people that I've spoken to about how they do active listening, is they're actually thinking and questioning and interrupting someone when they're listening, right? So most people are not good at listening because they're doing something inside. And if you're doing something inside, it's like people don't appreciate this, but if you're thinking out in your head, right, while someone is speaking, it's the same as if you had someone's loud voice in your ear whilst you're trying to listen to someone else in your other ear, right? That's essentially what most people are doing all the time when they're listening. They might be thinking about what they're going to say next. They might be thinking about what to ask. All of that is stopping you actually hearing the person. And so one of the most prevalent problems in society today is that people are not being heard because they're being interrupted. People are kind of and also they're not. When you look at someone in the eyes whilst they're thinking, there's a disconnection there because it's like they're not really looking at you; they are looking inside their brain. And so even when you're looking at someone, it's like something feels off. It's unconscious. Most people aren't aware of what's wrong, but that's the problems with the way most people listen. So the way I recommend listening, and that is as if no one else exists and nothing else exists, as if what's being shared with you is the most important thing that you've ever heard, and to have a deep, deep space and silence within yourself. If you notice yourself thinking, bring your attention back to just the focus of what the person's sharing with you, and you give your deepest of attention to that person. Now, even on that talk you were at, there's one person at the back was when I was getting people to share things, he was saying he felt listened to deeply through this. Now, the person wasn't, the rules are you don't speak, you don't say anything. If the person runs out of something to say, you still stay silent and you wait, because through that silence and through that space, that person gets to connect with themselves. And then they get to share something maybe they would never have considered before, or something they've forgotten. It's like they get off the surface of the tip of their mind. They get to something deep within themselves. And then guess what? The chance for connection is so much deeper. The connection with themselves and the connection with you. So that deep listening. And the thing is, if you do this well, what you're actually doing is you're creating memories inside of your mind anyway of what the person's sharing, because you're stepping into what they're sharing. You're feeling, you're using all of your senses to listen, really, because not everything's directed at this person. So you don't need to think about what to say. It's your own memory anyway, right? Something will emerge at the right time when it needs to. And then there's also one important thing which came up at the talk actually, which is you may get a feeling of urgency, like you need to say something, right? That is an anti-sign. If ever you get an urgent feeling to speak and there's not a life or death situation occurring, because the only time urgency is necessary, that is an anti-sign. That is a sign that your ego is getting triggered and you're about to interrupt this person when it's unnecessary. Because if it's truly important, you'll remember it and you can say it later when the person's done, you know? So that's an important thing. So deep listening in that way, and watch out for the anti-signs. Yeah.
That's great. It reminded me of, there was something that a quote I was reading from Dalai Lama. He said that when you talk, you are only saying what you already know. Whereas when you listen, you actually have a chance to learn something from the other person. So it is, and I know what you mean, that many people, if not most, they listen so that they can respond. They listen to respond. They don't listen to understand. And I think that creates quite a lot of barriers in people connecting. I mean, when we did the exercise that you were instructing us, I felt the lady I was sharing my story with, I hadn't met before. And within a few minutes of doing this practice, I really felt a connection, because she would look at me, she would listen, and I think it was the opposite as well. I immersed myself into what she was saying and trying to empathize, and I will share that honestly about myself. It's not something that comes naturally to me. I have to practice and really, try to be an empathic listener, or to really deeply connect, because this is very, very active, very active.
And yet in a few moments you did.
Absolutely, yes. There was too much, there was an incredible connection. So any practical tips on that? Is it just a matter of practice, or is it anything else that we can do to work on that more?
On what, the listening part?
Yes, the deep listening.
I'd recommend just know, because it depends on what your default is. Mm-hmm. Some people will naturally speak very little, and so what they'll be doing, if that's true, they're most likely thinking a lot whilst being silent. So if you do that, I would recommend practicing this deep silence, activating all of your senses. And a really good way, I call it virtual reality listening, which is you just step into what someone's sharing with you in a visceral, all sensory way is what you do. Because when you do that, of course, you're filling your attention with what the person's saying. There's no attention left for whatever your thoughts were triggering, if you do it well. Now, what may happen with this is that the person you're speaking to is not speaking in a way that's interesting to you. So trying to do this, you're finding it hard, and that's okay. You may need to change the conversation, take the lead and go, actually, this isn't, try and take it somewhere else. Or it may just be this person isn't for you. And because if you can't give your full, undivided, deep presence to this person and what they're sharing, there's something wrong. And most people, they feel something wrong, but they don't know what to do about it. So then they just disappear in their brains and they try to check out. And it's like, you're checking out from life when you do that. So it's a good sign, actually. Like, check with friends and people you spend time with. Do you really want to spend time with this person? Because that can, when you actually do this, it can red flag some of the relationships you have and the people you're spending time with. So that can be that. So that's one thing if you're someone who doesn't speak a lot. Mm-hmm. If you're someone who does speak a lot, then I would recommend deliberately silencing yourself and activating the listening more. Allow someone else to take the lead in the conversation. Ask an interesting question and be silent. And what will happen is you'll get that uncomfortable feeling where it feels like you've been silent too long. Good. Allow that to go further.
Yeah.
You can go, sometimes you could be silent for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on what's being shared. I was with a friend just recently and she was sharing something deeply troubling for her that she's going through. I don't think I spoke for, 25 minutes or something. Didn't need to. She shared. And then afterwards, I said some things. I can't remember what it was at this particular moment. It doesn't matter. But I held her in my silence. And that's what we're doing. You know, when you're giving all of your attention to this person when nothing else exists, they feel held and supported by you. Because then you're not glancing when someone walks past. You're not, you know, you don't hear a sound and you're listening to that. You're not interrupting someone's train of thought. You're just here. It's powerful and it's beautiful. And it does create a powerful presence. You know, if you do this and you practice this, you become a person that has weight to you when you walk around, and people can see it and experience it, and it affects every single interaction you have. You know, it's a really, really important skill, this deep silence and deep listening in this way. Plus, you get to know people really well too. You get, you know, really quickly actually.
Yeah. And you know what you just said, to just listen. Many people just want to be listened, and whereas, and I think that happens with men very much, they want to offer solutions. So if you start telling me about a problem, instinctively I want to start telling you, oh, you can do this and you can do that. But that's not the point. Many people just want to be heard rather than someone giving them unsolicited advice or what they would do in their place.
Yeah, because all it is really, it's like you're poking someone. You know, someone's sharing something, they're like opening their heart to share something, and you're going, hey, I can fix this. And, you know, you don't realize that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Most people aren't stupid. You know, your advice really is probably nothing they haven't heard before, something they don't know themselves anyway. So if they're not doing the things that could make their life better, there's something else going on. And the only way they're gonna, because they need to see it for themselves. The only way it's going to happen is by communicating. So to enhance something that Dalai Lama said, actually, by speaking, you do actually get to understand yourself better if that you're being heard in this way. Because when you say something out loud, it sounds very different to when you think it. You know, as came up with one of my clients, like, there's power in the out loud. So by saying out loud the things that are going on in your life, you actually get to hear yourself in a way you may never have before. And that all by itself, just with someone else receiving it without interrupting you, can have you know exactly what you need to do. I mean, we're talking pure coaching here as well, right? This is kind of what a lot of what coaching, an important part of coaching anyway is, you know, it's very, very, very effective. In fact, the better coach you become, the less you'll end up saying during the coaching part of your work.
Fantastic. That's great. David, let me ask you some quick fire questions as well. All right.
Okay, let's see how quick fire they are.
What does personal development mean to you?
See, it's not that quick a question because
I'm testing you.
So do you mean to me personally, or do you mean the concept of personal development?
What does it mean to you? However you want to answer it, it's up to your interpretation.
See, this is why it's not a quick fire question. Okay. So I think, unfortunately, as far as the way it's utilized, it has been misguided, as in people are filling their brains with stuff to do, and they're missing out on the meaning of life that actually means they would know what to do. One of my, someone I used to work with actually doing deep connections, came up with the great sentence. I don't know if she remembers it now, but it's wonderful. And it was during one of our retreats we were running. And it was very simply this. It's like, you don't need to do anything, which personal development is about doing a lot of the time, right? You don't need to do anything. Just one thing only. And that is to be deeply honest. Honest with yourself and honest with the people around you and the things you're doing. Because if you're deeply honest, guess what's going to happen? You can't hide or deceive yourself from what life is like. And you're going to feel that deeply. And through the feeling deeply, you're going to do things. You know, you will know what to do. Even if you don't know what to do, you'll know to ask someone to help you know what to do, right? That's when you seek out coaches and mentors and trainers and stuff, right? But if you're just deeply honest with yourself, you can do that. The problem with personal development is they often jump, and a lot of coaching actually, they jump in on what people say they want without actually going deeper into what's going on in life itself, which means all that stuff that you think they say they want, they may not want, you know? So that's a lot of the problem with personal development is too surface level. It's missing out on the deep stuff that could actually make the biggest of differences in the quickest of times.
That's great. David, if you could go back in time and meet your 20-year-old self, what's the one piece of advice you would give him?
It's tricky because I wouldn't want to change a thing because life is extraordinary. And so if I was to go back and tell him anything, I probably wouldn't, I'll be honest with you. I might just go back and just understand him a bit better, deeper, so I can actually utilize those lessons now more, because everything had to happen the way it did for me to be who I am and live the life I've lived. And I've helped a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people. And the way I understand life, I had to go through the hell I experienced to be able to internally understand the mechanisms myself, then to help others. So I wouldn't change a thing. If I could speak to a 20-year-old though, and give them advice, it would be a single piece of advice to a 20-year-old. It would be to take the risks. Do not get caught up doing anything anyone else tells you to do. Whatever you feel you want to do, go and do it. You're probably going to fail at it. Fail quickly. Fail big. Enjoy the failure, because you're going to fail in life. If you can start to own what failure is, which is truly a deep experience of life, where you get to find out who you are and what your failings are and what more you need to learn. Just fail as many times as you can towards something that matters to you. You cannot in life you cannot fail if you do this. And if you get this quickly, because my nephew's 23 actually, so I've been helping him with this. It's like you essentially set yourself up to have a life of just anything you want it to be. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Fantastic. And the next one you might answer in a similar way, but I'll ask it anyway. If you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today, would you change something?
Oh yeah, definitely. So in the world, what I would change is, let me think, because in fact, this came up. I was watching. There's a guy called Chris Gardner who is the Pursuit of Happiness is a movie, and he's the star. So I connected with him on Instagram, and I'm because I was like, he's done interesting things in his life, right? He lived, incredible things, and he did this thing. He says, "What 3 wishes would you have?" And he had world peace and a couple other things, and I was like, the answers. I'll be honest with you, the answers weren't very good of what he's put there. They're just very, very like too big in that way, too conceptual. So I was like this, no, what I would do, I would wish for critical thinking, to train children and adults to think critically, which means for themselves. So it means you do not take on other people's ideas without experimenting for yourself, without thinking of the contrast, challenging ideas continuously. So you have to own your own thoughts, your own understandings, your own beliefs. You do not take on anyone else's without learning how to critically analyze what's going on in life for yourself. That's one thing. The other thing would be the alignment with emotion. It would be to experience all of your emotions deeply, and to learn to never act your emotions out onto somebody else. Because those are two very important different things. So the one is experience your emotions fully. If you need to cry and let people see you cry. Have honest connection to your feelings. And the other one is to not become a victim of your emotions by throwing them at somebody else just because you feel a certain way. So I think those 3 things really would change the world in such a significant way that it would solve the world's problems. I think that would solve all of the world's problems, as much, apart obviously everyone that can be solved, I think would be solved through that.
Yeah, emotional control. It's such a big topic.
But it's control without control as well, right? Because you're allowing the full flow, but you're also not letting somebody else be a victim of your emotions. So it's the control thing can be a tricky thing. But it's I suppose it's emotional maturity is what we're talking about. Yeah, very important, and most people don't have that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Is there any big aha moment or any big lesson that you have learned that you would like to share?
Obviously, many.
Of course.
Let me think. Can I swear? Is that okay to swear?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so I haven't spoken about this one in a while. Actually, I should show you this actually for a start. This was just the launch of my coaching career. Was holy fuck amazing actually. My first coaching business, I called it that, and it worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
What's worked for me extremely well. One of the reasons why I've been able to create a lot in a very short space of time and create a level of freedom in my moment to moment experience is what I used to call fuck my future self. Uh-huh. And what that means is that I would say yes to things that terrified me because I would not have to deal with it. My future self would. And the truth is, because I've made an agreement to do that thing, he's just going to have to do it. He's going to hate me because he's hated me many times, right? I've hated him many times. You know what I mean? It's like that. But by putting in things in my calendar, which I don't want to do, but are going to grow me, that has transformed everything. Because in the moment of that experience and the willingness to experience it, things change you cannot conceive of. So that's physically, emotionally, psychologically. It's challenging yourself in ways that you don't think you can handle, but that will grow you in such a significant way you will never be the same again. You do that a handful of times a year, you'll be a very vastly different human being. Yeah.
Fantastic.
As my clients will attest to.
David, before I ask how can people connect with you, there's one last thing. Is there anything you were hoping I would ask you and I completely missed it?
No, nothing comes to mind. I'll be honest with you. No,
okay. Sure.
Because I didn't come with any intention for the conversation. I came to flow and connect and to see where it emerged. So no, I think that last question was a good one, actually.
That's great. So how can people connect with you? Where would you direct them?
So Facebook's where I hang out primarily. Well, I'll say primarily when I'm online, it's Facebook, and that is David Saville 78, like my personal profile is the best place. Instagram, I am David Saville, is a place I began playing with, which is interesting to me. And LinkedIn, which is also David Saville 78. There, in those three places. Yeah, I write posts. I record videos. I'm continually sharing things in three main ways. One is how to change yourself as a human being, like to create the superhuman version of yourself through your actions that way. Mm-hmm. The other one is to articulate and how to communicate publicly. Of course, I work with a lot of coaches, right, and people like that. So the ability to communicate who you are and your expertise online is something I also talk about. And then, of course, for coaches, the art of transformation, the mechanisms of change and how to run a successful coaching business and to create something that's very unique and all yours that is just awesome. So those are the things I talk about, and those are the places I talk about them. Yeah.
Awesome. David, I want to thank you very much for being at the show today with me. It was a very intriguing conversation, and there were so many things that I'm sure there will be of immense value to the listener of the podcast. Any parting words?
Yeah, I'd say people underestimate what's possible for them. People walk around thinking they're ordinary. It's like people... You get by the media and all this kind of stuff, getting so caught up in the superficial, the way we look and the clothes people wear and all this superficial stuff, that people have lost the connection to the extraordinary that we are. There is not a human being who has ever lived who can tell you how we got here or what life is. There are lots of theories, not a single human being knows. And the only way we'll find out is after death. Either we'll find out or we won't, right? And because of that, because of the miracle of existence that we are, it means that extraordinary is our birthright. And if you don't feel extraordinary, then you are missing out on the spark of life that we all have, that is available to us just by our existence. So that's vital, and that's every single human being who watches this. Yeah, you are extraordinary.
So are you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Aggie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. please take a moment to subscribe, rate and review this podcast on iTunes, Spotify or Stitcher. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in.